Now we move on to the next natural progression from working on the character's arms to get to work on the character's fingers. Woo! Very exciting. I love the fingers of characters. I think working on hands is like, that's just the best part because they can be so expressive and there's so many different ways of rigging up the character's fingers. Many people just add forward kinematic joints, which is great. They let the animators do what they want. Others try and create fancy attributes that have to do with inverse kinematics and all sorts of crazy things. Or I've even heard of people doing finger attractor rig setups where they create like a surface and the hand, as the hand gets closer to that surface, the fingers sort of try and blend onto it. Personally, I prefer something that's pretty easy to set up. It solves about 99% of the problems, is easy to work with, and doesn't confuse the animator at all. It's basically a combination FK rig with a little bit of something extra to add for pressing of the wrists. So let's go ahead and take a look at some reference material and see what types of things are necessary. Okay. Here's just a couple of quick sketches of some examples. I sketched this one of this lady when I was in an airport, and she was throwing out a Starbucks coffee mug, and the way that her hand was extended was just awesome. Just the way the fingers were all spread out and everything like that. Super expressive, and of course, doing a thumbs up. Very important to be able to do that. So, with the documentation, there are some videos. In this first video here, you could see me reaching forward to grab onto this post, and as I do, you can notice how my hand is locked down, my fingers are starting to grip it. They overlap a little bit, so notice the hand is locked first, and then the fingers start to bend down. Then as I push off, my hand rolls forward and the fingers flip up at the end. Here comes the next person. This is Kevin. He does the same thing. Hands come down. And then watch as he rolls. You can see the pivot is right about here. And then as he pitches forward, the fingers start to bend and flip off. This next person is Bryce. He reaches in. Fingers roll down almost exactly the same as mine. They flip off. But then when they leave, they cup together really nicely. Right in there. And then Jason Osipa with the gloves. And he's got some great stuff happening here where the fingers come in, the hands are locked down, but the wrists are moving and rotating a tiny bit, gyrating. And then they slip up, come forward, and then start to fall. Woo! Blink. So you can see a lot of really interesting motion there. Here's another example where I come forward, plant my hands, spin around, and then watch here as they roll to the side like that. Then I plant them again, and spread them out. And finally another one of Jason Osipa. Here where he's got his two fingers being pulled straight, the other one's pulling apart, these ones grabbing. Just being able to create really interesting hand shapes like these. Very important to be able to do stuff like that. So as we can tell, and just like every other part of the body, extremely expressive fingers are integral to defining a character's personality. Fingers are extremely individual as well. If you watch the way people hold their hands, someone who's very relaxed and casual will keep their fingers open and relaxed much more than somebody who's wound up tight like a loaded spring. Someone with obsessive compulsive disorder might keep rubbing their fingers together or picking at something. People use their hands to display and mask emotion. If you watch someone lying, they might scratch their nose, crack their knuckles, etc., maybe tweak their ear. Whatever it is, they use their hands all the time to give away their emotional states. And no two people use their hands exactly the same way, and no two emotions will give the same pose. So it's important that there's a way for the animator to pose all the fingers very quickly while still allowing them to have individual control for every joint in the hand. So if we look at some of our general animation requirements that our finger rig will contain, we have forward kinematics for general gesturing, the ability to press into a surface or lightly lift and twist the wrist. As you could see what was happening when I was putting my hand down or when any of the other people were putting their hands down on that post. This helps show weight and pressure. And we need the ability to layer animation controls to create intricate shapes. So let's go ahead and explore our rigging toolkit for our fingers and try out a bunch of different ideas. So the first thing we're going to look at is the ability to press the hand down into something. Basically, we want the ability to rotate the wrist up and down while locking the fingers into place. This will allow us to show weight and pressure and stuff like that. To do this, we're going to use a similar technique to something that if you've ever done any leg rigging, it's called a reverse foot rig or an inverse foot rig. It's similar to that, but a little bit different. So let's go ahead and take a look at basically what the concept is. If we look at a normal joint hierarchy, it works like this, where you've got the parent over here on the left, and then the joint on the right is a child of that. If you do forward rotation, you could see that that joint goes down. What we want to do is be able to do inverse rotation, or a reverse rotation, where we take the top, the parent, and rotate it up while leaving the child where it is. This is called an inverse foot rig or a reverse rig or something like that. What this allows us to do is create a standard hand rig which has the root starting at the wrist and follow through the fingers, but be able to lift the wrist and leave the fingers alone. So let's start by creating a new scene, and in here we're going to create a segment joint chain. So we'll go to a side view and we'll just go to Animation, Skeleton, Joint Tool, and go click, whoops, hold down X for grid snap, and let's just change the display of our joints so they're a little bit bigger, like that. Perfecto. And we're going to add some geometry to these segments just so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. Now in order to control these joints on an individual basis, for example, I want to lift this one and do basically that type of thing, I'm going to add some IK handles onto each of these joints, because otherwise there's no real way for me to lift this one up and tell this one to stay put, right? So we'll go Skeleton, IK Handle Tool, Option Box, make sure we're on a single chain solver, and I'll just create IK from there to there, and an IK from there to there. So you can see we've got these IK joints, and if we were to save keys on both of these, you can see that I can take this one and start to move it. And the IK joints will try and keep, or sorry, the IK handles will try and keep the joints stationary. But because there's no bend happening in here, it's really difficult to do, and unless you move this exactly in a circle, these joints jitter around quite a bit, kind of like crazy. But there's a way we can get around that. What we're going to do is simply group these two IK handles together. Control G. So you can see there's a group here, and if I move that group, those two IK handles will stay the same. So in order to get this joint now to move correctly, you can see we still have that same problem. What we want to do is actually move this joint in a direct arc, just like that. So what we can do to do this is we want to move the pivot of this joint. But if we go ahead and try and just move the pivot itself, you'll notice it actually moves the joint because the joint's position is based off of where it thinks its pivot is. So instead, we're going to create a locator, and we're going to make that the parent of the joint. And we'll put the locator right here, take this joint and parent it. And now if we take this locator and rotate it, you can see that we are able to lift the joint up and get this bend that we want, while the fingers or the rest of the hand stays totally stationary. Now this is pretty cool to be able to move the pivot like that, or to move the joint and bend it like this, but if you look at the reference video, you'll notice the hand doesn't just always bend straight up and down. Sometimes it leans side to side, so our goal is to add this functionality as well into the reverse hand rig. So how do we do it? It's actually much easier than you would think, unless you think it's really easy, in which case it's exactly as easy as you would think. So first thing we're going to do is change the name of this locator to something that makes sense. We'll call it bend loc. And what we're going to do is create locators that do the specific moves that we want, and then create a control system to do it that makes more sense to the animator. So first let's scale this geometry to make it more hand-shaped. And I accidentally selected the joint there. So we'll just make it flatter, or fatter. Fatter and flatter, like that. That's much better. That's more like hand geometry. And we can still bend this, as you can see, right there. So let's see what happens if we try and now bend side to side. You can see that we lift this up, and it looks just like a hand. Imagine the fingers coming out over here on the right, and this is the palm lifting up. It looks just like a palm would. But what happens when if you try and take this and then lean it side to side using the rotate Z? It looks like it's breaking down the middle. If your palm did this, that would really hurt. That's not what you want. What you want to have, and the reason why you don't want that is it just looks weird. um, and what you want to do is make it so that it actually bends and leans on the side right there and right over here. Okay? So to do that, let's go ahead and create another locator. Bring that back down, create locator, and we'll position this over on the side. If you hold down C for curve snap, you can just drag right along there, and there we go. Now what we're going to do is parent group 1 and bend loc underneath locator 1, like so. And if we take bend loc and we rotate it in X, you'll see we have the same thing. But now if we take locator 1 and we rotate that in Z, see how it lifts up? Boink! Like that. That gives us the ability to lift the hand to the side. So how do we do that on the other side of the character? Or the other side of the hand? It's the exact same way. Create another locator, snap it over there. We'll take the locator 1 and parent that to locator 2. And now if we take locator 2, we can bend this way. So we have one locator that bends the hand like this, another locator that bends the hand like that, and then the third locator that's used to bend like this. And that gives us the functionality that we want for lifting the hand and going side to side. The problem is, as we always know, we want to make things simple for the animator, and that is so freaking complicated it would drive them crazy. Can you imagine if you had to animate like this? It would be absolute torture. You'd be like, okay, now I want to pick it up to the side, and okay, well, which one do I grab? Okay, I'm going to grab this guy, so I'm going to do that. And then you go, oh, I want to lift to the other side. So you go here, and you're like, oh, before I do that, I need to make sure that I zero that one out. And then I go like this, and then I do that. And then what if I don't accidentally zero it out, and I bring this down too far? Now I'm off axis here, and it's going to be, it'll be just a nightmare. That'd be totally insane. So what we want to do is create one locator that's going to make it more one control for the palm for the animator to use. And this control is going to have two attributes, lift and side to side. And that way, there's no way that the animator can mess things up. I mean, the animator can always mess things up somehow, but we're limiting the possibilities of it happening. So let's create, excuse me, let's create a palm control, and we'll just create another locator for now, like this, and put it up here somewhere. If I can click it and drag it. There we go. We'll just position that right there. And we're going to call it palm anim for now. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove all these attributes because we don't need translate, rotate, scale, or anything like that on there. Or remove, let's just hide those. We don't want to even see them. We don't want to look at them. We don't want to think about them. Okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to add some attributes. We're going to add bend, and we're going to add side to side. Now here's a quick tip. Instead of going channel, add attribute, there's a little script right here that you get with the DVD called Add Adder. Click on that, and it's a quick add attribute script. So if you type in bend and hit enter, it automatically creates a control called blend, puts it in the channel box, and then puts you right back here so you can then add side like that. You can have as many as you want: foo, freak, flop, skiggle, wicked skid, whatever it is. And you just keep typing and keep hitting enter, and every time you do, it adds a new attribute there. A little bit quicker than using the standard add attribute dialog. Let's rename the locators to make it easier to find them. So locator 2, we'll just call this side 1. Locator 1 will be side 2. Okay. And the control, we have palm anim. There we go. So let's go ahead and set up the controls for us. So we'll select the bend control, or bend locator here, and we're going to use the rotate X. So we'll go here and go to set driven key. The driver is going to be the palm anim, so we're going to load the driver there, and the bend is going to drive the rotate X. So we'll set a key for that, like so. Now we want to figure out how much this is going to bend. Let's go to Palm Anim, and what we want to do is just sort of click and drag the mouse a certain amount. Like let's say maybe set it to 50. And then go to Bend Loc and rotate it as much as you think that would feel good for rotating to that amount. So let's say around here. Doesn't have to be exactly, equal to Palm Anim key. And what you should do is really, when you're setting controls like this, make sure they feel right. Does that feel too slow? Does it feel too fast? Because this is what the animator is going to be doing. They're going to go back and forth, and you want to make sure that they have the granularity to get the pose they want, but they don't want to have to sit here and go drag, 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 drag. It shouldn't be like drag, drag. All right, I want to lower it down, so I'm going to do this. It should feel natural. Bring it up, bring it down, bring it up, bring it down. So what we did was we set it to a value of about minus 77. Okay? Let's go ahead and bring Palm Anim back down to 0. Cool. And now what we want to do is side 1 and side 2. So we're going to select both of those and click Load Driven, and we're going to use the Rotate Z. Now we'll go to the side, and of course we're going to set a key for everything to be 0 right there. Now again, when you take side, if you go here and you drag, whoop, say to about 50 or so, you want to make sure that it moves in the correct direction for that angle that you're driving. So let's say this is going to go up to about 70. Like that. Oop, 70. And we'll set a key on both of those. Then we're going to go back to side. And we'll go whoop, and we want to do the exact opposite. We want to make sure that the animation on these two is exactly the same. Since it's the same move, it's just one's going out and one's going in. We want the animator to feel like it's exactly the same. So we'll set this to negative 50. Not negative 350. Minus 50. And we'll go to side 2 and we'll set that to minus 50. Like that. Or sorry, minus 70. Because that's what we did on the other one was 70. And we'll key that. So now we've got side. And you go boom, 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 like this. And bend. Dink, 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 dink. Just like that. Now, something that's really important here that I kind of briefly mentioned, but I really want to make sure you guys understand this. If you go to the graph editor here, under Window Animation Editor's Graph Editor, and you look at the curves that are created for the side, notice how they ease in and out? That's kind of okay. Personally, I prefer it if they don't do an ease in and out at the end, but you can do that. What I wouldn't do is go and say, okay, now I want to modify this, so I'm going to add a key in here, and I'm going to start doing stuff like that, so it really accelerates and pushes on one side that's different than on the other side. Because what this means is that you're making decisions for how the animation is going to be interpreted and interpolated between keys that the animator has no control over. And if the animator wants a very linear move from here to here, if you add something like that to it, they're going to have to try and figure out what you're doing and counter animate it to get the move they want. So in general, when you set up relationships with set-driven keys, try and keep the curves as linear as possible to make it so the animator doesn't have to fight to get what you want, and they control the interpolation themselves. So anyway, you can go ahead and save this now and keep track of it, because this is a pretty cool little technique to be able to bend things up and go side to side, adding locators to do exactly what type of motion you want, and then putting it all in one control to make it easy for the animator so they don't even have to think about it. So now that we have a method for dealing with the hand itself and getting the palm to work, let's go ahead and try and apply that to the actual hand rig and see how it feels. Go ahead and open your latest version. And what we're going to do is move the hand control itself down to the origin to make it easier to work with. So in order to do that, go ahead and go to your Do Not Touch layer and turn off the reference so that you can select the hand geometry. Then if you go and hit F in the outliner, you'll find L hand geo in here. Go to L hand, and we're just going to duplicate it by hitting Control D and then Shift P to unparent it, so it's just sitting out in space. Okay, and we're going to rename this joint to L hand base, and we're going to set the translations down to 0. And that will move it down to the origin for us. Let's go ahead and just hide all anim so it's not distracting us. And we'll zoom in down here. Boink. Just like that. Let's save the scene as finger rig version 01. So file, save scene as finger rig 01.ma. And what we're going to do is create a joint structure for the hand. So the first thing we want to do is delete lhandn because we don't need it anymore. And let's go to a top view. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create joints for the finger, but we're not going to worry about the individual joints for each segment of the finger where it's going to bend. We're basically going to create one like the metacarpal here for the hand, and then just something for each individual digit. So we'll go to Animation, Skeleton, Joint Tool, and first we'll create one for the pinky. So click around here, right about there, so, and then right here on the knuckle, like that, and then down at the end of the joint, like that. We'll do the same thing for the middle, so about here, about there, and about there. And then the same thing for the index finger. There and there. And then again, finally for the thumb. So about, oops, we don't want to actually add it to this joint. So I'm going to change the display of the joint sizes just to make it a little bit smaller so I'm not accidentally picking them. Maybe 0.05, like that. Alright, so let's go back to our joint tool, and we'll add the thumb about over here, and then here, and about here. Now if we look at our perspective view, you can see that the thumb doesn't actually line up like that. So what we want to do is rotate the thumb joint down a little bit. So we're going to rotate the base a tiny bit, just so that this joint right here ends up inside the hand. And then we're going to come down and we'll rotate this one a bit more, so that ends up inside the thumb. Like that. Now we want to make sure these joints orientations are zeroed out, so we're going to select the base of the thumb here, and we'll go Modify, Freeze Transformations, and bring up the option box. And we're going to turn everything off except for Rotate and Freeze Transforms, like that. So now the rotations are zeroed. Okay? Now we're going to name each one of these joints, because right now they're a bit confusing. So if you go here, see how we've got all these joints all crazy like that? So under here, instead of clicking and clicking and clicking to select all of them, if you select the top joint and click on the shape, oh not the shape, you click on the select hierarchy button right here, it'll pick the entire joint hierarchy. Then we're going to go to the hash rename button, and we're going to change the name of this one to L_fing_pinky_number_joint. And now that means we have left finger pinky 1 joint, 2 joint, and 3 joint. Okay? We want to do the same thing for the rest of the joints. So this will be our mid joint. So select the hierarchy, hash rename, L_fing mid number joint, like that. This one, select hierarchy, joint rename, L_fing index hash joint. And then this one, select the hierarchy, L_thumb hash joint, like so. Now all of our joints are named correctly for the hand. Let's fix the parenting a little bit. We'll unparent the hand geo, select each of these controls and parent them to the base, like that. And let's save this next version. File, save scene as, fingerrig2.ma. The next thing we're going to do is skin the geometry to these joints. This will be done so we can see how the skin deforms with the joints. Well, why are we skinning instead of parenting the rigid geometry, you might be wondering or asking. The reason is because the hands are so expressive that I've found when animating that parented geometry on the hands just doesn't quite give you the resolution that you need to really see what they're going to do. You can certainly do it, and for roughing in animation it's fine, but I really want to show what the hand needs to be able to do. And for the animator, for me personally, when I'm animating, I don't mind a tiny speed hit if I can get much more expressive. However, if you quote me on that, I will deny it completely. So, always go for speed. But in this case, for me, I want to show it skinned so you can really see what it's going to do. If it does slow down the rig too much, then yeah, definitely add segmented geometry. So, how are we going to skin the hands? Well, first of all, if we just select the joints, and we select L hand geo, and we go skin, bind skin, we'll do a smooth bind. Let's bring up the option menu. We want the joint hierarchy, closest distance, max influences of 3. That's the maximum number of joints that are going to be used. Maintain the max influences on, that's fine. Drop off rate of 4. All the defaults there are totally fine. Now we click bind skin. So if we rotate the fingers, we should see the skin moving with the geometry. And it does. This is fine for our first pass rough skinning. We're going to be modifying it later, but for now, it does what we're expecting it to, which is great. It just moves the skin. Cool. Let's go ahead and save this. File, save scene as, version 3. So now we want to create the palm bending control. Let's go ahead and, this is fun. I like doing this stuff. So let's go ahead and add that. Alright, so first thing we need to do is create IK on the fingers just like we did before. So with more than one finger this time, we're going to need more than one IK handle. We'll need one for each finger. So we'll go skeleton, IK handle tool, and we'll create IK from here to here, and again from there to there, and from there to there, and also from here to here. So we got 4 IK handles for each of the individual finger controls. So we're going to rename them. This will be L, Fing, Pinky, IK handle. This one is going to be L, Fing, guess what? Mid, IK handle, because of our consistency of naming. L, Fing, Index, IK handle. And L, Fing, L, Thumb, IK handle. Now let's just go ahead and group these IK handles together like we did before, and we're going to call this L, Fing, IK handles. And you can see that if we take this group and translate it around, each of these, the fingers will bend and move, etc. And if we take the hand base and move that, it starts to move things. Cool. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a locator for the bend control. And we'll go create locator. And we're going to move this locator to the position of the middle joint, since that's the middle of the hand. Point snap, and we'll just put it right there. Like that. Now, last time what we did was we parented the hand base to the locator, but instead of parenting it, we're going to actually just constrain it this time, because we want to keep these two hierarchies separate. It makes it much easier. I'm just going to hide the IK handles for now. Makes it much easier to keep things organized and swap out controls later if you need to, if you constrain things. So I'm going to select the L hand base. I'm just going to duplicate it, and then I'll delete everything underneath it, all the children. And we're going to call this L hand base const. And we will constrain L hand base to that by going constrain parent, so it gets position and rotation. And then we'll parent the L hand base to locator 1. Now let's change the name of locator 1. We're going to call it L Fing Bend Loc, like that. So if we select this and we rotate it, you can see that we now have a locator that will bend the hand right there. And you can play with this, of course, if you want. You can move the locator if you need to try a few different things and see where where you think the best position is. I tend to find that middle joint is probably the best one to work with. So now we want to create the locators for the side-to-side motion, right? So let's go ahead and create another locator. This should all seem very familiar to you now. And we're going to position the locator right around over here. And again, play with the position of these to get the locator to be exactly where you want. I'm going to put that one about there. Okay. And then we're going to duplicate it so we have a third locator. And we'll put that about here. And we're going to rename these. So we have elfing side loc. Actually, this one should be elfing side loc. This is going to be elfing side 2 loc. This will be elfing side loc. We'll parent that to that. Parent this one to that. There we go. And now we want to create an intuitive control, because right now, as you can see, we can bend this up and that looks nice. The side locator will pull the whole thing up that way, which is cool. And this one will pull everything that way. So what we want to do now is create our hand control. I'm just going to hide these locators so we don't have to see them. And instead of having a locator like we did earlier for creating the palm lifting and stuff like that, let's make something that's a bit more intuitive. How about a control that looks like a hand? Let's go ahead and import a hand control. So go File, Import, and in your example files icons directory, you'll see hand.ma. Go ahead and import that. And if we zoom out, you'll see some icons that are a curve that looks like a hand. Woo! How handy. Ha ha ha. Let's go ahead and scale the hand down so it fits our actual rig. So let's scroll that down a little bit. And you can see the hand is actually made up of a bunch of different curves. So we've got our main hand control like that, and then we also have individual curves for our individual fingers, which we will use when we're animating to select and work with individual fingers. So I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees here, just so it lines up with our hand. Okay? So now what we want to do is add the bend and side attributes just like we did for the locator earlier. So we'll select the fingers, and then we'll go over to our shelf, click on Add Adder, and we're going to name this attribute bend and side, just how we did before. So we bend to the side, and then we're going to use the set-driven keyframes in order to set them up. But before we do that, we've got to remember to rename everything correctly. So we're going to go in here and search and replace on these. Click on grep rename, and we're going to search for hand and replace with L, like that. So now we have L fingers, L mid, L pointer, L, etc. Just how we wanted. So now let's do the bend one. So we'll select elfing bend loc. Actually, let me show these again so we can see them. And we're going to go to the rotate Z set driven key. Our driver is going to be L fingers bend. We'll key that. And remember, before we set bend to 50, like so, and then we'll take this one and we'll bring it up, say to about minus 70. We'll key that. So now we've got bend working. Gets pretty fast once you know what you're doing, doesn't it? And then we're going to do the two side controls. So we'll grab both of those, load driven. We're going to choose the rotate X. Side is our attribute. We'll key that. We'll take L fingers and take side and go over to about 50. And then we'll take side loc and we'll rotate it in X to about minus 60, maybe minus 70, like that. Key both of those. Then we'll take the side, set that to minus 50. Grab this one, set that to minus 70. Whoops, to 70. Like that. Make sure you're going in the right direction. Key that. And now we've got a side control. that'll do this, and we've got a bend control that'll do that. And so now when you're animating, the animator can totally control exactly what it is that they're getting in here and get the exact shape that they want without much fighting at all. Hide the locators. Cool, so we've got a perfectly working palm rig. This is awesome and very easy to set up. Let's save this version as, we'll call this Finger Rig version 4. So if your character doesn't need to be able to bend their fingers, you're pretty much done with the hand there. Woohoo! But most of the time you will need to bend the fingers. So let's go ahead and attack that problem. So when creating joints that can bend, we want to make sure that we can have basically enough joints in the fingers to bend correctly, as a finger normally would. But we also need to be able to rotate the palm up like it is. So we need to be able to bend the joints, and we also need to be able to keep the joint stationary while we lift this right here. But that's not all. We also need to be able to rotate the finger joints under the stationary joint and keep them stationary while the joint's rotating. Like that. We need to be able to do that too. So, how do we do this? Let's go ahead and create the bendy joints. And what we're going to do is let's delete the, detach the skin on the hand so that we can work with the joints and apply the skinning later to them. So we'll just go Edit, Delete by Type History, because we don't want to carry that around. And then what we're going to do is first create the bendy joints for the pinky here. So here's our pinky joint. We've selected pinky 2, and we're going to duplicate it by doing Control D. Notice that when we duplicated it, we end up with a duplicate effector here. That's because we're duplicating something that has IK on it. So we're going to delete that effector. We don't need to have it. Now what we want to do is split this joint. So notice if I pull it away, there's another joint right there behind it. We're going to split this into 3 individual segments to represent what the finger is going to be. So we'll choose the split selected joint, segments into 3, click OK, and we've got our split segments there. Let's go ahead and quickly rename these joints so it's easier for us to work with. So we're going to have the first one selected. We select the hierarchy, and that'll pick all the way down. And then we'll choose the hash rename. And this is going to be called L Fing Pinky Pinky underscore hash underscore skin, because this is what we're going to be skinning to, these joints. Like that. Now let's go ahead and position the joints correctly so that they line up with the knuckles, because right now they don't. So if we take Elfing Pinky Skin 2 and we translate it a little bit in X so it lines up with the knuckle there where it's going to be bending, we'll grab the next one and pull that back a little bit so it lines up more with the knuckle, and then the end one, we'll just go ahead and pull that back a tiny bit as well. There we go. So now our pinky skin lines up. And finally what we want to do is make sure that when we do lift the hand base and pinky 2 joint gets rotated, for example here, if I bend this up, notice how when we're bending here, these joints follow along. They're bending as well. We want to parent them to this joint because that's not moving. So we can basically take the pinky skin, parent it directly to pinky 2 joint, like that. And now when we bend, the joint will stay there. And it'll follow along with whatever our pinky joint's doing. Okay? So now we want to do the same thing for the rest of the joints. So we'll select mid joint 2. We're going to duplicate it, delete the effector. We're going to split this into 3 segments. Then we'll rename each of these segments, and we'll call it L Fing Mid Hash Skin. We're going to align them with the joints properly, or with the knuckles, like that. Align that one up, and align that one. Make sure I'm just doing the Translate X there. Cool. And then we'll parent that one underneath the skin. Do the same thing for the index finger. Duplicate it. Delete the duplicated effector. Split it. select the hierarchy, hash rename, L, thing, index, hash, skin. Align it with the knuckles. Like so. And then parent index 1 underneath, or the skin underneath the index 2, like that. And we'll worry about the thumb in a little bit because that's going to be a special case. So each of the fingers has 3 joint segments, and these segments are the ones that we want to use when skinning the hand, not the stationary ones that helped us before. So let's go ahead and save this, the current version here. We'll go to File, Save Scene. We're going to save this as FingerRig version 5. So in order to skin this correctly, we're going to have to change the way we do the skinning a little bit. Let's see what happens if we do it the same way we did before, where we select the base and the hand geometry, and we go skin, smooth bind. Let's just go ahead and, for example, bend each of these individual skin joints on the index finger. Watch what the geometry does. It gets all crazy. That's because it's trying to skin to these joints that are flat out there, the skinning joints, and everything else, and that's just nasty. We don't want to do that. So let's undo all that, back before the skinning, and figure out a different way to skin that's going to make more sense. Well, the best way to do it is to skin to basically select all the joints that we want to skin to, and then just skin to the selected joints instead of the joint hierarchy. So it's a bit tedious to do that every single time, so we're going to create a quick select set to help us pick the joints we want. And to do that, here's what we'll do. We're going to select elfing, select the skin, pinky skin, mid skin, like that, and then we're going to click on select hierarchy, like that. Okay? Then we'll create a quick select set. So create set, quick select, and we'll call it elfing skin, like that. Now if we look down here in the shelf, or in the outliner, you'll see we have elfing skin right here with all those joints in it. So anytime we want to get to those, we can just do that. That makes it much, much quicker. But we want to add some other joints to the skinning set as well. We want to add, we want to add the base, we want to add the thumb, and each of these individual joints like that. So how do we add those? Pretty simple. You just select them, and then we can just click and drag with the middle mouse button right on top of the elfing skin, and that adds those to that quick select set. So now, if we do this, we've got all of our controls that we want, all the joints we want in the quick select set. So let's go ahead and skin this. So we'll select each of these guys, select the skin, and then go skin, smooth bind, option box. And instead of closest or joint hierarchy, we'll choose selected joints, bind skin. Now if we pick those 3 joints there and rotate them, you can see that the skinning is much, much better. It's behaving a whole lot better. But let's take a closer look at the skinning and see if this is really getting what we want. Notice when I bend the joints and really curl them, see how it's kind of losing volume? If I do this with my hands, I would expect that all the skin and muscles in here are going to bunch up and I'm going to get a really strong shape. And unfortunately, because of how it's losing the volume, this looks very weak, and it's going to be really hard for the animator to get the nice kind of solid looking fist or hands that they want. So we need to fix that. Not because the controls are wrong, but because the result of what we're looking for is going to be incorrect. And it's not what the animator wants. So because our final skinning system may not use this, we don't care if this is perfect. Basically, we just want it to be good enough to look like what we're expecting it to look like, so the directors can final the shots and not be going, can you grip the hand a little bit stronger, or can you do something about the fingers? Don't worry about that. We'll let the animator just get the nice shapes they want and then make sure that it looks good later. So we'll delete by type the history because we want to get rid of that history. And what we want to do is add some intermediate skinning joints. These are joints that are basically there just to help keep volume and make it look good as it deforms. So what we're going to do is select index 1, pinky 1, and mid 1, each of those. And again, we'll select the hierarchy on the shelf so we get all those guys. And then there's a script here called add halfway button, or add halfway joint. So if I click on that, what it's going to do is find the joints that have children and add a child halfway in between each of those joints. So now we can simply select those and drag them down like that, so they end up about halfway down here. And they're highlighted right now in the, whoops, we have them selected in the outliner. So what we're going to do is just simply drag those down so they end up on in our set like that. So now when we go to select these things, you can see they're called skin half child. Those are automatically in there. So let's do a smooth bind with that. Select there, skin, smooth bind. And let's take a look at what the index finger looks like now if we bend that. Much, much better. You can see there's still some creasing and popping in here, which you could take care of by painting the skin weights if you wanted to, but this is fine for animating with. This gives us really good representation of what the joints are going to do, and it feels really solid. It feels like it's not losing any volume or anything like that. So that looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and save the latest version of this. Save scene as. Go to version 6. So the fingers are skinned and working, but what about the thumb? Well, good thing you asked, because that's our next step. You're very smart. Look at you being all sharp and everything, knowing what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and delete the history on the skin. Edit, delete by type, history. Notice I'm not afraid to delete the history. I enjoy deleting the history. It's good fun. Okay. Our goal now is to segment the thumb similarly to how we segmented the fingers, but the thumb is going to be a little bit different for two reasons. The first is that there's only two segments, and the second is we need to have a way to angle the thumb so it bends correctly. The fingers are pretty easy because they were just straight up and down. The thumb has to be at this angle. I've seen a lot of rigs where the thumb is built totally flat, just like the fingers, and it means you end up having problems getting correct hand shapes because your thumb is not flat. If you hold your hand up, you'll see that it's actually built at an angle like that when it's relaxed. So what we want to do is make sure that our joints are oriented correctly. So first let's create the joint structure. What we'll do is we'll select thumb 2 joint, and we're going to duplicate that same way we did on the other fingers. Delete the effector. And then we're going to go ahead and split the joint, and we're going to have 3 segments. Now hold on a second there, Tiger. Didn't I say earlier that the thumb only has 2 segments? I mean, look, there's the joint right there. There's the knuckle. That's true. The thumb only has 2 segments, but we need to use one of these extra joints to twist and orient the thumb correctly along this axis so that we get the correct orientation that we want. Okay? So let's see what we're going to do. Let's rename the thumb joints. So we select each of these, click them, click hash rename, and we're going to call it L thumb hash skin, like that. And we're going to fix the alignment so that the thumb aligns properly down that joint. So notice right now how the alignment is straight up and down. The axis doesn't follow the axis of what we want for the thumb. We actually want to be aligned more like that, up and down there. So how do we do that? The first thing we're going to do is change the size of this first joint here. We're going to bring this one back to 0. Or we're going to make the scale of thumb 1 to be basically 0. So we're going to take thumb skin 2 and we'll change its translation to 0, like that. Then we'll take thumb 3 skin and we're going to translate it along so it lines up with the knuckle. And then grab the child of that and bring that out so it lines up there. And then we want to twist L thumb 1 skin until L thumb 2 and everyone else lines up with the actual geometry. So how do we do that? And the reason why we're doing that is that now L thumb 2 skin which is going to be what all of our rotations will be based off of, we'll still have a value of 0. So we're basically putting all of our twists and rotations in this thumb joint and leaving 2 and 3 alone so that they can be reset to 0 whenever they need to be. Okay? So how do we align this and make sure that we're doing it correctly without going rotate and then select and then go back and rotate and select, etc.? What we're going to do is create some geometry and we'll align it using the geometry. So we're going to select this. So then we've got the thumb selected. We'll click on Add Geometry, which is going to create this huge piece of geo. And we obviously don't need the geometry to be that big. So I'm just going to scale it down like that. Scale it down this way. And we're going to use this to align exactly along the axis that we want. Notice how it's straight up and down? If I take thumb 1 skin, and I start to rotate it like that, we can see exactly what it is that we want our thumb to be, our thumb is going to be aligned. So then we go to thumb skin 2 and thumb skin 3, and our joints are aligned correctly. So basically what we're doing is we're just using a piece of geometry to help us find the best axis here to orient along. Okay? Cool. Let's go ahead and delete that geometry because we don't need it anymore. Now that we've got our joints aligned correctly, let's go ahead and freeze the transformations on thumb 1 skin. So modify, freeze transformations, make sure it only rotates on. There we go. And now thumb 1, thumb 2, and thumb 3 are all aligned exactly how we want. Now of course we want to add the proper skinning joints for the thumb. So there's already a few thumb joints in the Elfing skin set. Let's see what we've got. We've got thumb 1 skin and thumb 4 skin. We also have thumb 1 joint, thumb 2 joint, and thumb 3 joint. So some of these we want to be taking out, and some we want to make sure are in there. Let's go ahead and add the ones that we want that aren't in there yet. So we'll scroll up here till we have thumbs 2 and thumbs 3 skin, which aren't in there. And we'll go ahead and drag them down onto the set using the middle mouse button. So now they're in there. Now to remove the joints that we don't want, it's not as easy as just dragging them out. We actually have to go to the relationship editors and go to sets. And then on the left side, you'll see there's our Elfinger skin set. And on the right side, we'll see everything that's in it. So if we click on that, you'll see if we open it, there's all these joints that are in there. So what we're going to do now is remove the ones that we don't want. And removing, we simply just click on thumb 2 joint, thumb 3 joint, and as soon as you click on it, it pulls it out. So it's not in there anymore. We also don't want L thumb 1 skin because that's got a value of 0. We're not going to worry about it. Cool. Now that the joints are aligned, we're going to take the 2 and 3 skins and we want to add some extra joints to help, some halfway joints to help with the skinning. So we'll take both of those, we'll click on Add Halfway Joint, and then we'll translate those down. Notice they're already in the skin, like that, in the skin group. And we're also going to add one to help out with the base over here because this is a very important part of the hand, is making sure the base is moving correctly. So we'll select that one and then add a halfway joint for that as well. And then we're just going to position that down within the palm a little bit to help out with skinning. There. And we're just going to add that to our skin base. So we'll find that one, drag that down to Elfing Skin, and let's see how that works with the skinning. So if we select all of our geometry that's in there, all of our joints, select the geometry, and go Skin, Bind Skin, Smooth Bind. Now we should have everything moving correctly and binding correctly. So if we take our 2 joints right there, our thumb, and we bend them, you can see that we're getting nice deformations and it's bending along the correct axis. And it all looks beautiful. Let's save this. File. Save scene as Finger Rig version 7. So before we continue on, let's take a look at the naming of the joints that we've got. We've kind of gotten things all over the place. We have skin joints that aren't being used for skinning, joints named all sorts of things that have nothing to do with their function, and it's impossible to look at the naming and figure out what each joint's function is. We can figure it out now because we just created it, but if you look at this 2 weeks from now, you'll be totally confused and you won't have any idea what it is that's going on. So let's step through all the joints and name them properly. This isn't the most exciting step, and I go through all the reasons of why to do this in the documentation and how to do it, but this is what we're going to do. We have a table in the docs of all the new joint names, so I recommend looking at that. But let's just quickly go through and change the names and figure out what they're going to be named. L hand base. The new name is L hand base underscore skin, and because we're using the joint for skinning, so we want to make sure that it has the name skin at the end. L pinky 1 joint, we're going to call this L fin pinky 1 base skin, and we're calling it base because it's the base of the pinky joint, and skin because it's being used in skinning. Elfing pinky 2 joint is going to be elfing pinky, we'll just call this orient joint, because we're using this to orient the entire pinky along a certain axis, so we know exactly what it's for. And this is going to be elfing pinky orient end joint, okay, because it's the end of this orient. So this makes more sense here. The hand base skin, pinky base skin, orient joint, orient end joint, like that. The effector 5, we can change the name of that as well. Elfing pinky orient effector, so we know what that's being used for. Alright, now let's go ahead and take a look at the mid joint. Same thing here. Elfing mid base skin, because this is the base and we're using it in skinning. Mid orient joint and orient end joint, like that. And L fing mid orient effector. Go down the index, and again, index base skin, index orient joint, index orient end joint, and elfing index orient effector. Now we know what these are all for, and that makes a lot more sense, but we still got to do the thumb. That's going to be L thumb base skin, L thumb orient joint, L thumb orient end joint, L thumb orient effector. Okay, this L thumb skin, we're actually using this to control the twist, so we're going to call this L thumb 1 twist. And then this is going to be called L thumb 1 skin, and this is L thumb 2 skin, and this is L thumb 3 skin. And then this will be L thumb 2 skin half child, and this is L thumb 1 skin half child. That makes a lot more sense. So the names are fixed. It's a lot easier to figure out what's going on. Let's save this file. Save scene as version 8. Now we want to check our rotation orders to make sure that before we do any of the curling and stretching and squashing, all the little individual finger rotations, everything is set up correctly. Imagine if you have your rotation orders wrong, and every time you try and spread the fingers, the spread control and bend control were in gimbal mode. So you would get totally confused, like you'd spread and they would possibly bend, or you'd try and bend and they would just spread a little bit. You'd go totally crazy. And if you're going crazy, the animator's going to go extra crazy because we're very sensitive. So we want to take a careful look at all the joints to make sure the rotation orders do what they're supposed to do. Let's start with the rotation orders for the pinky. And we'll look at the pinky 1 skin, like that. Okay? So let's pretend we're going to squeeze the finger. So we'll take the rotate Y and we'll bring it in, like that. Notice that the rotate Z does not follow the finger. Try and rotate the finger in Z now, and you'll get this weird twisty thing happening. This is bad. This is very bad. We want to make sure that the rotation order allows for us to squeeze the fingers together and still bend along that joint axis. So what rotation order do we want to have? We want to make sure that when it goes to the side, we can rotate along that, so we'll check out what options we have. We want to make sure that Y is the last one, so we can look at either ZXY or XZY. If we choose ZXY, then the bend will always be the last thing that happens. So you could see that if that's the case, if the finger is twisted, bend is going to follow along that axis. And if it's twisted this way, bend will follow along this axis. My personal preference is actually to do it the other way, XZY. So twist is the last thing that happens, because that means you can bend, you can go in like this, and then at the very end you can always twist the joint a little bit. That's my personal preference. Your mileage may vary, your animators might like something else. So for me, XZY is the rotation order that we want for all the fingers. So let's go ahead and set those really quickly. What we're going to do is select the finger pinky base skin, because we'll be looking at that. Just go through all of them. Mid base skin, index base skin. We're going to select pinky 1 skin, pinky 2 skin, and pinky 3 skin. Mid 1, 2, and 3. Index 1, 2, and 3. Thumb base. Thumb 1 skin and thumb 2 skin. And we're going to click on the rotation order button on our shelf right here. And we'll change all of them to XZY and set it. And now each one of those should have the correct rotation order. Let's go ahead and save this. File, save seed as. Version 9. Now let's go ahead and start setting up our finger controls, because the joints are oriented correctly, they're named correctly, the skinning's working. But what's the best way to set them up? We want to give major gross control to the hand in a way that's easy for the animator to work with, and also provide control for individual joints so they can customize shapes to their heart's content. For example, a single curl control would be really handy and easy to use for the entire hand, but it always gives a consistent result. A value of 0 is always straight, a value of 100 is always curled, it always curls the same way and the same amount every time. For example, curl of 0, curl of 100. It's always the same. Every animator will want to vary the shape of the fingers a bit. They do it for various reasons. The character is going to do something specific. The hands might be moving quickly and they want a smear shape. The character is going to press down on something, etc. There are an infinite number of reasons as to why an animator would want to animate individual joints, and an infinite number of hand poses they should be able to create. For example, here's a pose where it looks like a finger is pressing down on a table. Notice how the joints don't curl the way you'd expect using a simple curl control. You need to be able to bend this joint right here backwards a little bit. So we want to be able to have individual joint control, but individual control over every joint can take forever to animate. Most animators are on a strict time schedule. They've got a set number of seconds of animation they have to do every week, and they don't have the time or energy or patience or desire really to spend all their time animating fingers. So the best solution is to provide them with a fast and easy global control that'll take their hands 70 to 90% of the way there, and then give them individual rotation for the specifics. So how do you have two separate controls driving a single object? Well, set-driven key is the answer. So let's take a look at how we can use set-driven key to drive one attribute. Here we've got a couple of objects in our scene. This is a NURB sphere, which is being driven by two set-driven keys, NURB sphere 1, NURB sphere 2. So here you can see you've got two animation curves being controlled with a set-driven key, and then there's a blend weighted node in between them. So when you add, basically if you take NURB sphere 2 and you do something, that animation control gets fed into the blend weighted node, and NURB sphere 1, that animation control gets fed into the blend weighted node, and both of those go into the NURB sphere 1. This happens by default when you create a set-driven key, so we don't need to think about it. So this is what we can do with the finger control. We can create a whole range of hand controls and then create individual finger controls for each finger. All of them will be using set-driven keys to drive the joints. See with the individual fingers? This is going to be cool. So if we think about the types of controls that we need for the hands, we want to know what is the hand going to need to do. First of all, we need a control that can curl the fingers in. So we need some sort of curl control. Second, we need a scrunch that allows us to scrunch the fingers up by bringing the tips in towards the palm without bending the finger down. Imagine you're scrunching your toes, that type of action. We'll also need some sort of relax control that will allow us to curl one side of the hand more than the other. For example, the pinky and ring finger curled in more than the index finger. We also need a cupping control, one that gives us the shape you get if you try and bring your thumb forward to touch your pinky. And also we need a spread control for spreading the fingers. Then I like to add things like twist and lean just to add a little bit of overlap and interesting shapes for when you're doing fast motions. You'll also notice that I've pulled out two of the individual controls to work only with the thumb individually. I find that if I have curl working on the fingers and the thumb, it gives me odd results, not what I want. Same thing with the scrunch. I want to be able to control those individually. So we'll have a curl and a thumb curl, and a scrunch and a thumb scrunch. And then we've also added those for spreading. So a mid spread, which will allow us to take the middle finger and choose either side, and a thumb spread. You'll see these as we get going, how they're useful. So let's go ahead and quickly add these attributes to the hand control itself. So we're going to L fingers. We're going to click on that Add Adder, and we'll start adding in some of the controls. So we'll do curl, and again, you just type in and hit enter. This is where it becomes much easier to use this quick add attribute than using the add attribute window. So curl, thumb, curl, scrunch, thumb, scrunch, relax, cup, spread, mid spread, thumb spread, twist, and lean. I almost typed and. So let's go ahead and add a curl control for the fingers. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and select the finger base skin, and then L-Fing Pinky 1 skin. Let's actually start over there so we get the base. And then Pinky 1, Pinky 2, Pinky 3, Mid 1, Mid 2, Mid 3, Mid base, Index base. Make sure we've got the index ones. Index 1, 2, 3, like that. And those are going to be all the things that we're using for the curl control. We'll bring up the set-driven key. So animate, set-driven keys, set. And these are going to be all of our driven objects right here. So let's select L fingers and load that as our driver. Just move this over a little bit so we can see what's happening. Okay. Since we're going to start off with curl, we want to take all of our driven objects here, and we're going to use the rotate Z as the curl control. Okay? So grab rotate Z like that, and then we're going to grab curl, and we'll click key, because right now L fingers curl is set to 0. Sweet! Now what we're going to do is set it to 10, and this is going to be our maximum curl. I chose 10 just because it's an easy value to get to, and it's consistent. You can choose 100 or 1, whatever it is that you want. So now we're going to rotate the joints so that the finger looks like a curl. So to do that, I'm going to take just a little bit here of the base and rotate that down. I like to make this kind of look like a fist when I'm curling this. So if we do the bases and we add just a tiny bit of rotation on those, it's going to give a feeling of compression for the animator, or for the shape. And it's just a tiny bit on there. Then we'll take the fingers like that, and we'll just curl them in like so. And you should really go through each one and make sure that it's doing exactly what you want. So bring that in a little bit more. We'll bring this one in a little bit more, and that one in a little bit more. Okay? And then we'll do the same thing on the mid. Don't be content to just let them each rotate individually the maximum amount, like that. And then the index. like so. Okay? Alright, so we'll go ahead and select everything here. Make sure we've got them all, and hit key. Cool. Now if we go to fingers and we curl and uncurl. Oh, and I missed a couple. Set that to 10. I forgot these two guys. Make sure we get them. It's always important to make sure you grab everything. Key that. Alright, so now the whole thing works curling. Great. So we've got our first curl going forward. But we also want to allow for curl going backwards. So we'll set that to -10, like so. And then we'll go through again and select everything to make sure that they move correctly. Now in this case, we're going to grab the index and mid and pinky and rotate them up, because these joints can move up quite a bit, especially if you're pressing into them. The other joints below them can't move quite as much. You want to be able to add for a little bit of rotation, but it doesn't need to be pushed too far. Okay? So again, we'll select everything and key. So now we've got positive, negative, positive, negative. And our curl is set up. So the next one down, thumb curl. Now the thumb curl is a little bit more complicated because it's going to be doing, when the thumb curls, it doesn't just curl directly in like this. When the thumb curls, it actually does a little bit of orbiting around the base. So we want to make sure that we can do it correctly. Before we do that though, I'm just going to create a quick select set of just the finger joints in case I need to get back to them later, just because it's easier to then pick them instead of having to go through and grab everything individually. So let's go ahead and select the things that we need for the thumb. So we'll select the thumb base skin. We want thumb 1 twist, thumb 2 skin, or thumb 1 skin and thumb 2 skin. So we'll load the driven on that. And because we're going to be doing more than just bending, I'm going to do a set driven key for everything, all the joints, or all the rotations, X, Y, and Z. So right now, thumb curl being 0, we'll just go ahead and key that. Then we're going to set thumb curl to 10 to be consistent. And what we'll do is rotate these joints. So we'll take the base skin, and we're going to rotate that a tiny bit down. We'll take the twist, rotate that down. Thumb 1 skin, like this. Actually, the twist we don't want to bend down. We want to take thumb 1 skin and bend that down. Now we've got thumb 2 bending down. The twist we're going to use to just pull kind of that way and like this a little bit, so that gives us the kind of curl that we want. So key that, fingers, take the thumb curl and go back to -10. Take the base, lift that up a little bit. Thumb 1 and thumb 2, like that. Maybe take thumb 1, pull that up a little bit more. Take the twist, twist that a little bit, and there we go. Get all those, key. So now we've got a thumb curl, which does that, and we've got our regular curl, which does that. Cool. Now while working, I've noticed that there was something that was a little bit broken. If we take the base skin here and we move it, notice how the thumb moves? Whereas if we take the base skin on the index finger, see how it doesn't move? That's because I forgot to do something. I forgot to parent this thumb twist joint to the orient joint. So we'll do that real quick. That's going to work much better now. So now base skin will do what we expect, which is that. Okay. Cool, let's go ahead and set up the finger crunch controls. L fingers, scrunch. That's what we want. So, luckily we set up a quick select set here for finger curl. So we can pick all these guys and do load driven. And again, we're going to be doing this on the rotate Z attribute of scrunch. So we'll set the default to key like that. And then we're going to go ahead and go to fingers scrunch and we'll set that to 10. And then here's what we want it to look like. We want to grab each of these, the index for example, we want to rotate that up. And then we're going to grab down below it and we'll do this and that one and we'll do that. And then the idea is to have the fingers kind of lay a little bit flat. Like this. So that's our scrunch. That's what we want to do. Maybe a little bit in like that. Okay? So we'll do the same thing on all of the other fingers. So mid one, we'll bring this up. And you may have to tweak this individually to try and get exactly what you want here. But the idea is to have the fingers go relatively flat, so that it feels like it's scrunching along a plane. Like that. And then we'll do the same thing on the pinky. Doop, up there. Down like this. Down like that. And like that. Okay? So then we'll key all these again. Scrunch. Like that. And you get that scrunchy motion. Scrunchy! So what about a negative value? Well, you can't really scrunch backwards, so we could leave it alone, but we could put some negative scrunchiness in there. And I think if you put negative in, it can't really hurt. You never know what type of shapes you might want to achieve. So, you know, you can think of it as kind of a hyperextension of the fingers if you want. It's really up to you. But I like to put just a tiny bit in, just because I think that it might look kind of cool. So we'll go ahead and bring that finger down, and then we're just going to inverse them up a bit like that. Now you never know what the animator might use this for, so I figure better to put in extra stuff and then have them ask you to take it out if you don't want it, or they just never use it if they don't want to use it, which is fine. This isn't going to slow down the rig at all. If it slows down the rig, then I would say don't put it in, but it won't slow down the rig, so we might as well use it because it could be fun. Cool. So again, take all these, key. So now we've got positive scrunch, negative scrunch, positive scrunch, negative scrunch. Alrighty. So now we're going to do the same thing for the thumb. So we'll go ahead and choose the thumb scrunch, and we're going to get the base skin, thumb 1 twist, 1 skin, 2 skin, load driven. And again, because of the uniqueness of the thumb, we're just going to choose all of the rotations. Thumb scrunch of 0 is going to be default, so we'll key that. Set a thumb scrunch of 10. And we want to scrunch this guy up now. So we can have it look something like this and that. Maybe do this, and then if we go up to the twist, rotate that a little bit if we want or not. Take the base, pull that up if it helps, like that. Key that, and a negative 10. Pull that down, pull that down, and pull that up. There we go. Key that. So now we've got the first 4 settings done for our fingers and for our thumb. Let's go ahead and set up the next one, which is relax. So again, we'll grab all the finger curl controls, load driven, we'll go down to relax. We're going to take all of these and again use our magic rotate Z of relax of 0, key that, and let's set a relax to 10. And what we want to do is bend the joint so the pinky is bent more than the middle finger and the middle finger is bent more than the index finger. It looks a bit like this. Let's go ahead and get to that pinky, and we'll grab pinky base skin, pull that down, pinky 1, 2, and 3. We'll bend them a little bit, more so pinky 1 than pinky 2 and 3. A little bit more of that. Cool. Grab the mid base, add just a little bit there. Mid 1 skin, and again we don't want this one to go as far as the pinky. We're just trying to make the hand look relaxed. And then the index base, a real small amount, if anything. And then index skin, again, just a little bit. Like that. And that gives us a relaxed feel. So we'll take all of these, key them, then we're going to go to relax and we'll set it to -10. Okay, and now we're going to do a negative relax. And you might be wondering, what in the world is a negative relax look like? Well, it kind of looks like a positive relax, only inversed. So the index finger goes down and curls more so than the mid finger, which may move very similarly. You could probably copy the values if you wanted to make it exact, but I like to make this a little bit not quite exact, but just close. And then the pinky a tiny bit. Now why would you have an inversed or reversed, oops, insert. Why would you have a reversed relax control? I will show you. So key all these. So now we've got a relax that does this. And what happens is, if you combine this with a curl, for example, and you go a little bit more relaxed this way, and then you key these, and you go, okay, now I'm going to curl, I'm going to uncurl this, and then I'm going to curl it back up again. And you could take your relax and you go, alright, as I'm uncurling and then start curling again, I'm going to switch over to that. You can go like, woo, and start overlapping the stuff, and you get some really, really cool looking motion. All relatively easy, all offsetting. So, it's pretty handy. Let's break those keys, set these back to 0. Let's go ahead and save this where it's currently at. File, save scene as. And we're going to choose Finger Rig version 10. Alright, so the next one that we're going to use is a cup control. So let's go ahead and select each of these. And we're going to, again, bring up the set driven key. And in fact, we're going to add in the thumb as well. So we want to make sure we've got thumb, the thumb based skin, thumb twist 1 and 2, in addition to all these other ones, and load those as driven. And we're going to key all the rotations there to make sure that we've got them all. And we'll go to cup. Cup is going to be 0, obviously, when it's like that. And then when we set cup to 10, what we want to do is make it look like the fingers are being cupped. So the first thing we'll do is take the thumb, and we're going to bring it down about like this. Maybe rotate it a tiny bit. Go to the skin, and bring that one in there. Go to the twist, and just orient it a little bit. We use the rotate Y. Bring that in like that. Okay. And the goal here is to get the pinky over to that. So we're going to take the pinky, and we'll twist it a little bit. Bring that down. Let's go and grab this skin one. We're going to bring this one in, like so. We're going to orient it a little bit so it's facing the right direction. And we're going to give it a little bit of that and a little of this. Okay? There we go. Now we can go to this one, and we just want to kind of do a relax, just sort of like what we did before. Because you notice that you can't really move your pinky without moving your middle finger. It's kind of impossible. Now this shape is probably one that's going to be used more for just getting a quick sculpt of what you want. It's probably not going to be used as often as the other shapes. So you can be pretty specific about what you want this one to look like. But it may be used in conjunction with others. So there we go. That's the sculpt that we want. So key that. Now we've got our, oops, I forgot to key the rotate Z. Haha. Key that. We'll set that back to 0, and of course I went through and completely forgot about these guys, so 0 them out. Because I forgot to set the rotate Z. There we go. Now we've got our cup control. Okay, cool. Now do you have to worry about an inverse cup? No, we're not going to worry about that one. So we'll move on. We want to spread the fingers. Okay, so the spread control itself, what I like to use is the individual top joints here of the fingers. So each of these guys, the skin ones, and these base controls. And that's it. So we're going to load driven on those. And we're just going to be looking at the rotate Y of each of them. Okay? So a 0 spread will look like that. Set the spread to 10. And we're going to try and scale it, or make it look bigger. So we want to grab each of these little guys and start stretching the hand out. So we'll go like this. The mid will probably pull just a tiny bit over, and then the pinky base will pull over like that. And you really do want to go kind of excessive on these, because what you're looking for is something that's extreme. The Animator won't go this far, obviously. I grabbed some of the wrong joints. So we don't want to do those. So we'll undo that. Set driven key. Make sure the cup still works the way we expect. Cool. Spread. Shouldn't do anything yet. Okay, good. So we want to make sure we've got index 1, mid 1, pinky 1, base skin, base, base. Load driven. Rotate Y. Key. Okay. Now we'll take the spread to 10. And we want to go past what we normally would, like I was saying, because the Animator is going to go excessive with this, and they should be able to, and then they can tone it down as they want. So take a little bit on that one, mid 1. It should still look good, and it should still look like what you would expect if you were going to be spreading the fingers. But there's no reason why you shouldn't go crazy on this, and then let them control it. Okay? So we'll key that. Then we'll take a negative spread, so minus 10. And this is where you want to really make sure this looks right. So we'll bring the finger in like this, bring the mid one in a little bit like that, bring the pinky one in like that, and then we'll go to the base and pull that in, take the mid base and pull that just a tiny bit, and the index base and pull that in like that. Okay? Key. So now we've got the finger spread that looks like this, which is cool. That's what we want. But what about the mid spread? What's that going to do? The mid spread is used just to take this middle finger and kind of shove it to side, because a lot of times you can break up a really boring looking pose just by working with this middle joint. So we're going to take the mid and just use these two. And we're going to use the rotate Y, key that. Then we're going to take the mid spread of 10, and we'll take the mid finger, and we'll pull it all the way over this way, and the base skin, pull it over like that. Key those, and we'll take a mid of -10, pull that over this way, and the base skin like that, and key those. And now I can use this mid spread with anything else just to sort of shove the finger over a tiny bit and get a little bit of relax in there. And you can see that it just breaks up the shape really nicely, maybe a little scrunch. And this suddenly you have a much more interesting pose than you would have if the mid spread was exactly in the middle. You can do this, you can do that. It just becomes a lot more interesting, and it's a really quick way to break up the shape for the animator. So now let's go ahead and add the thumb spread in there. Okay, so we're going to take the thumb base skin, like that, and we want the thumb 1 skin and thumb 2 skin, load driven, and again we'll use the rotates, all of them. The thumb is a crazy beast, isn't it? And we're going to go ahead and key everything on that. Then we'll set the thumb spread to 10. And which direction do you do with the thumb spread? Well, you want to make sure that when you set these to 10, because the mid spread and spread go spreading out that way, you want the thumb to be consistent as well. So we'll take the base skin, and we're going to rotate that out like that. And we'll take the thumb skin, and we'll pull that out. And we might even pull it up just a little bit. And do that, just a touch. Okay? We'll key that. Now we'll take the thumb spread and set that to -10. And we'll take this base skin, we're going to bring it in. Thumb 1 skin, bring that up. And the base skin, maybe bring it down just a tad. Thumb 1, bring that down just a tad to line that in. And the thumb 2, I'm going to bring down just a little bit, and even in just a little bit, just to get the exact shape I want. So now we've got the thumb spread that works with the rest of it. Sweet! Alright, we've got 2 more to do here. We've got twist and lean. So twist is going to be basically just be on the mid skin joint. So mid, the number 1 skin joints, these guys. And they basically are just going to do that. So if we load driven, we'll take the rotate X, and we'll key those. Then we'll take the twist, set that to 10. Take each of these and rotate it to, say, -45. Like that. Key that. Fingers, negative twist, -10. Each of these, we'll rotate them to 45. Key. Piece of cake on that one. And then finally, we're going to look at the lean control, and that basically just pulls these fingers over to one side or the other. So again, we'll take the skin controls here, and we're going to grab the rotate Y of each of those. So load driven, each of these guys, the rotate Y, just because we want to do this and that. Okay? So we'll take the lean, set that to 0, take the lean, set that to 10, and again, take each of these guys and rotate them this way, key that, -10, each of these, rotate that way, and key that. And now we've got a lean that works with the spread, that also works with the twist, etc. We can start doing all sorts of fun stuff. Cool. Set that back to 0. And we've set up our global control for the hand that lets us to do quite a bit of animation just by default. Okay, let's go ahead and add some individual finger controls. Here's a list of the different types of attributes that we want to have on each individual finger. We should have curl, scrunch, spread, twist, lean, and then bends and length. You'll notice that these 5 right here are basically the same thing as are on the main hand controls. Now why do we do that? Basically, we want to be able to allow the animator to individually sculpt the hand the exact same way they could using the gross hand control. And it's imperative that each of these individual ones lines up exactly with what the fingers do on the gross one. So why is that imperative? Why does the finger curl, the individual finger curl for the index finger, have to be the same as the group control for the index finger? Basically, we want to make sure that we're consistent so the animator knows what they're going to get when they tweak a control. If they know that setting a curl of 10 looks a certain way for the index finger, it should look the same when they do it on curl of 10 for the index finger or for curl of 10 for the entire global hand. It's consistency, and it makes it so they don't have to think as much. They can predict exactly what they're going to get. So we know what the curl, scrunch, spread, twist, lean, etc. are, but what are the individual bends? The individual controls, the individual bends are the things that give the animator that extra little bit of control they want, the ability to bend the joints in the FK manner, meaning they can curl and then they can take the tip and bend that up just like that. Without these individual bend controls, they wouldn't be able to get those shapes. So it's really important to add them. Okay, so we're going to add the controls for the fingers. Let's go ahead and select each of these individual fingers. We're going to select the quick add tool, and we're going to add to each of these curl, scrunch, spread, twist, lean, bend 1, bend 2, bend 3, bend 4, and then length, like that. So these 5 all look familiar. Bend 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are all the individual joints, so they can bend them individually, and then length to stretch them out. Okay? You can also, notice I was typing those one at a time. If we undo all that, you can also in here just go like this. Curl, scrunch, just have a space and it'll allow you to add all of them at the same time. Spread, twist, lean, bend 1, bend 2, bend 3, bend 4, length. So you can do that instead of having to type them all or hit enter every single time as well. It's up to you. So the next thing we want to do is now copy the set-driven keys from the main control to the index finger and then to the other fingers as we go. So you can do this either by hand or you can use a script to do it. Before we go ahead and do the script, I want to save where we're currently at with the finger, just because it's always good to save stuff before you start doing anything crazy like this. We'll choose finger 10 or finger 11. Alright, and so let's go ahead and do the index, and we're going to copy the animation curves. Okay, so we'll go to the Set Driven Key Copy button on the Animator Friendly Rigging shelf, and it'll bring up this big interface that allows us to copy set driven keys. I'm going to scale it down just a little bit here so it's easier to see. Okay, and here's what this looks like. Over here on the left, we have a list of the objects that we're going to be copying a set-driven key from. Over here on the right, it'll show you the driver that you want to copy the set-driven key of. And then over here, you'll be able to tell it what objects you're going to copy the set-driven key to in case you want to copy them to a different set of objects. And then you can tell it what the driver is that you want. Okay? So if we select all of these over here, and then we click on L fingers cup, or curl, for example. We don't want cup, we want curl in this case, from the pick a driver section. Then we go ahead and click on load selected objects, and it'll basically pick the objects that you have selected in your scene and load those in. We want to make sure they're in the exact same order as from here to here because the order is important. And then we want to tell it to copy this curve control to the pointer right here. So I'm going to select the pointer, and then if I right mouse button here, I can tell it I want to go onto that attribute. This will show me a list of the attributes for the selected object that I have. So if we now type copy or click copy here, what that's going to do is if I go to the curl now, that's going to copy that animation control directly from the curl. So I don't have to do it manually anymore. It's all automatic. This is way, way, way faster than doing it by hand. Way, way, way faster. The other thing that happens when you do this is it actually echoes the command so that you can do this much quicker over and over and over again without having to set it up again in there. So for example, if I bring up my script editor right now, you'll see there's all of these commands here that just get printed out. Copy, set driven key, go, etc. blah, blah, blah. So if I take these guys and we paste them down here, I can use this to make things a lot faster. So let's look at the command and see what it's doing. Here's the mel command itself, js copy set driven keys go. Then what it does is it looks at the original driver, which is L fingers curl, and that is this thing here, L fingers curl, what we had in pick a driver. Then it looks at the driver that's going to be copying that animation to, L pointer curl, which is that right there. Then it says copy the animation from this object, L fing index base skin, which is the first one there, to this object itself, which is the first one there. And it runs it 4 times, once for each one of these that we have. So that's how you know it's going to copy it. So we can actually change this command or use this command in a script to set it up over and over and over again so we don't have to do this manually. Here's an example of how we can do that. If we change this pointer right here to middle curl, middle, middle, and middle, then we go over here to where it says index base skin, and we're going to change this to every place where it says index, we're going to change that to mid. So elfing mid base skin mid mid mid, and here as well. You can use your favorite text editor to do this if you want. Mid mid. Alright, so if you were to do that and then execute these commands by selecting them, hit the enter key, watch what happens. Now if I go to my mid control and choose curl, it does the same thing as well. You can see right now pinky doesn't do it, does nothing. So we'll go here, and then I'm quickly just going to change this to pinky. Pinky. Actually, I'm just going to copy that. Paste, 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 and execute that. Now what it's done is copied that. See? Pretty cool. That works very quickly. So now we're going to do the same thing for scrunch. So if we go over here and we pick scrunch, and then we come over here and we choose scrunch like that. So we don't want L pinky scrunch. We want index scrunch because we're using our index fingers. We'll click the copy button, and now you'll notice that scrunch works just how it's supposed to. We'll come over here to the script editor, delete everything there, grab these 4 commands, paste, paste, and then everywhere where it says pointer here, we're going to change that to mid or middle. Copy, paste, paste, paste. This is going to be pinky. Copy, paste, whoops, paste, paste. All the index ones, paste, 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 paste. And these are going to be mid. Copy, paste, 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 paste. You're probably getting sick of me saying paste, but we execute those all at once, and now suddenly scrunch works on these as well, and curl. And the nice thing is that you can modify this and change them because they're going on individual fingers. You can do things like scrunch that one and curl the others, etc. You start getting a lot of really great individual control. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is the spread attribute, because that's the next one on our index finger here, right? But if we look over here, the driver doesn't show up with spread. And that's because the only thing that's going to show up over here in the drivers list is things that are applied to all of the objects over here on the left. Okay, so what we want to do is make sure that we show only an object. We want to remove any objects here that aren't affected by spread. So you can see you've got delete and delete there. So we know that right now that Fing index 3 is not affected by spread. So if we click delete like that, you can see we get a few more things showing up here. Same thing with 2. That's not affected by spread. So we'll pick that. And then you can see spread shows up. If we right mouse button on it, you can see all the controls that are affected by spread. So we got index 1 and index base. So those two are right there. So I'm going to select both of those. I'm going to click load selected right here so that we have only those two things. So base 1, etc. And now of course we want to change the pointer over here. Select that guy. Right mouse button. Change that to spread. And we'll click copy. Now the pointer spread is going to work. And we'll want to do the same thing for the middle and for the pinky. So again, we delete all of these. We take our two commands there, copy them, and paste them. Paste it twice. We're going to change this one to middle. And then this is going to be mid, copy, paste, paste, paste. And this is going to be pinky. Copy, paste, 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 paste. Execute those. Now spread works on the middle one and on pinky as well. Unfortunately, this middle spread is kind of boring. It's only kind of doing this. What we really want to do is copy this big mid spread over to middle to make it really worthwhile. Otherwise, what's the point, right? So let's go ahead and actually undo the copying of all of these guys. Okay. And instead of copying the pointer spread over here, we'll do the middle like we had before. Copy, paste. But instead of L fingers spread, we're going to choose mid spread on this one. And these we could have left the same. And then pinky. So we're doing L fingers mid spread to middle spread and L fingers spread to pinky spread. So now, right here, middle spread does what mid spread used to, but pinky does what it's supposed to, and index does what it's supposed to. Okay? Cool, let's go ahead and save this right now. Choose number 12. Alright, the next step is to add that twist attribute. So, notice here, twist isn't showing up, so we're going to take this L first Fing index base skin and remove that. And you'll see twist is right there now, so we can use that one. First we got to remove the base skin from this one right here, so delete that. And we want to go to our pointer control and then come back here and choose twist. And we're going to copy that one. So now twist should work, which it does. And again, we're going to do the exact same things that we've always been doing down over here. Let's get rid of that one. Copy, paste, and we're going to choose L fingers twist to L middle, mid, mid, pinky, boink, boink. Alrighty, so now our pinky controls and middle controls all have twist. And finally, we want to add lean to this whole mix. Okay? So, notice here we've got lean, but I know that there's more being involved with lean than just this one control. I know that there's actually 3 controls. So I right mouse button over lean. It tells me all the controls that are there, and I'm just going to choose index 2 and index 3, and that will add those right to here. So I can select them from there, click load selected, make sure they're all selected, load that. Whoa, it's acting funky. Delete everything, then click load selected. There they go. And we'll go to L pointer twist, and we'll choose lean instead. Copy that. Copy that. Delete that. Grab these guys. Paste it again twice. And again, we're going to replace this with middle. Copy, paste, paste. This may seem like it actually takes longer to do this, but it's actually quite a bit faster, especially once you start scripting this whole thing, because now you've got all the commands that you need right here. Pinky, copy, paste, 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 evaluate. Cool. So now we've got lean on each of those as well. Awesome. Now we got to set up the bend controls now for the individual joints here. Now we can do this using set-driven keys by hand the way we've done before, or you can take a look at this auto set-driven key control which we've got, which will make things a lot faster. If you select the index or the pointer and click on this auto button, you'll see what this does is it allows you to pick a driver or an object that you want to use as a driver. Then it picks the object that will be driven, and you can choose either a current attribute or a new one, and then it'll tell you what the influence is. Basically, if we want it to be 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, etc. However you want it to work. Okay? So, let's go ahead. We selected the pointer. We clicked on our button to bring up the shelf. We're going to choose bend 1 right here. Whoops. Where'd you go? There you go. Bend 1 is going to be the driver. Then we want to pick the object that's going to be chosen as the for the attribute to be driven. So we're going to choose index 1 skin, like that. Or sorry, index base skin. Right mouse button. If you have that selected, just right mouse button and you can pick it, like so. And we're going to tell it what attribute that we want it to use. And in this case, we want it to be rotate Z, like that. And then we can tell it the amount of influence. We'll leave that at 1 right now and just click create. What that does now is if we select this and we choose bend, you can see that it actually goes ahead and bends the finger. Unfortunately, this is kind of inconsistent. If I set bend forward and I scrub forward like this, it bends it up. But if I take curl and bend forward, it bends it down. I really want to make sure that these types of things are consistent for the animator. And right now, this is not consistent at all. So we're going to undo the creation of that. And we'll bring up that window again. And we're going to set the influence to be -1 instead of +1. And create. Now if I go and pick that, you'll see that it's going to be consistent. It'll go -1. And what it does is it just keeps going. So basically you just sit here and go wah and go as far as you want. Okay, so we want to do the same thing on the rest of the individual fingers. And luckily, this gets executed in the script editor as well. So you can see here, this command, right there, JS set driven key auto drive. Tell it what the driver is, which in this case is bend 1, what the joint is that it's going to be bending, and the attribute, and then it gives you, or you tell it how much you want it to be applied to. So we can go ahead and copy this a bunch of times. Paste, paste, paste. And we can modify this. So we can say bend 2 is going to affect the index instead of base. We're going to choose 1, skin, rotate Z, -1. Bend 3 is going to be index 2, and bend 4 is going to be index 3, like that. Execute that, and now each of these bend controls will affect that just a little bit. See how that works? Cool. So we can do the same thing for the rest of the joints. And because we've got all four commands here, we don't have to even look at that user interface anymore. So what we'll do is we'll change this one to be middle, like that. Boom, boom, boom. And we're going to choose mid here. And then we'll take this one and make this pinky. And pinky, pinky, pinky. Whoops, pinky. Now we execute all of these, and you can see this is way faster now because I can go to each of these guys, and now my bend will work. And it's consistent with all the other ones. So using Mel here, you can make this a whole lot faster to rig up. Much, much, much quicker. Okay? Let's go ahead and save this current version. Save scene as. Choose that to be version number 3. And finally, each of these individual controls needs the length attribute connected so we can scale the length of the fingers. So to do that, we're going to use the Attach Length to Joints button right here on the shelf. And to do that, for example, we will select the index finger, so index 1 skin, index 2 skin, and index 3 skin. Then we're going to head to and add that selection, or the pointer to the selection, and then you click on the Attach Length to the joints, like that. It's going to ask you how you want to hook it up. So we're going to use scale. We're using it just because we want the bound geometry to follow. You can use translate, but the hand geometry itself is going to look nicer with scale. So we'll do that. And you can notice as soon as that happens, the finger scales to 0. Poof, and that's just because the length is set to 0 by default. So we'll just set that to 1, and the finger's going to look normal. Now you can scale that out and back, etc., and the finger will scale correctly. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the other fingers. Select each of those mids, 1, 2, and 3. Select that. Click on length, choose scale, set length to 1. Done. Each of the fingers, select that, length, scale, set length to 1. Now we have a length control that can work for each of these joints. You can lean them, you can spread them, you can twist them, you can bend them. You can do anything you want on those individual fingers. Let's save this again. Save as. Number 14. You notice we do save a lot. It's important. So all of our individual finger controls are set up correctly. It's time to add the thumb controls. Let's just make sure that does exactly what we want, and we will be good to go. So we want to add a list of individual thumb controls similar to the ones that we're using for the fingers, but there's a couple things that are different. We're using a curl and scrunch and spread just like we were before, but we're also adding this orbit control, which wasn't on the other one, and that's because we want to allow the thumb to be able to orbit around the base of the hand. Then twist, bend, and length are all the same. So let's go ahead and add the quick add attributes so that we can quickly add these ones. We'll select the thumb, click the add adder, and we'll add those ones that we were talking about. Curl, scrunch, spread, orbit, twist, bend 1, bend 2, bend 3, and length. Just like that. Kazing-gazing. There we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and start with curl. So we want to copy the curl from to the thumb. So we're going to come over here and we're going to delete everything from the from objects. And we'll delete everything from the to objects. Like that. Then we're going to pick the thumb, base skin, load that. And that's going to show us all the different controls that are on the thumb base skin. I want to choose the thumb curl itself. Like that. And if we right mouse button, we could see what other thumb joints are involved. So we have thumb skin, thumb 1 twist, thumb 2 skin, and thumb base skin, which we've got. So if we select all those and then click load selected, that'll load them down there. We come over here to the thumb, right mouse button, choose curl, and copy. And now our thumb curl does what we would expect. Cool. What's next? We have the thumb scrunch. Thumb scrunch is those same controls. We'll come over here, we'll choose scrunch, copy that. And thumb scrunch is going to be working now. What about spread? Well, if we start deleting some of these controls, we'll see when spread shows up. There it is, thumb spread. Right mouse button, we've got thumb 1 skin, thumb 2 skin, and thumb base skin. So we'll pick all those. Make sure we have them correctly. I'm going to delete that list. Select those, load selected. Come over here, and we want the thumb. Grab that. Thumb spread. Copy that. Now spread's going to work the same way, which is exactly what we wanted. So let's take a look at the next control, the orbit, and how that's going to work. The orbit is a nice one because it allows the thumb joints to orbit around the palm. It's as if you're trying to make a mouth with your hand and finger. So we'll go ahead and set that up now using the set-driven keys. So select the thumb 1 twist and the thumb base skin, like that. We're going to choose rotates, X, Y, and Z, and go to the set-driven key controls. Then on the thumb itself, we're going to choose orbit as the thing that controls them, and we'll key them set to 0. Then we're going to take orbit and set it to a value of 10, just like all of our other controls. And we'll take the base skin, and we're going to orbit that around. So we'll do like this, and we'll take the twist, and we're going to bend this down and orbit it a little bit. And bend that down like that. So the idea is that this is the control that we want. We want to be able to just bend that around. So let's go ahead and check that out and see how that works. We take the orbit, we go like this, and we get it orbiting around, just like we want. Now let's go ahead and add the twist control. So in the set-driven key window, we're going to set twist to be the driver, and thumb skin rotate, or thumb skin 1, load driven, and it's going to be the rotate X. So rotate X will be the one we're using. We'll set key on that. Then we're going to take the twist, and we'll put that to value of 10. We're going to rotate the thumb, and we'll rotate it back this way. So -45, like so. Key that, go back to the twist, set that to -10, and then we'll take the thumb and set that to a value of 45, and key that. Okay, so now it's time to go ahead and set up the bend controls for each of the individual thumbs. So we'll go ahead and select this thumb. We'll click on the Create Auto button over in the shelf, like so. And we're choosing the bend. Then we're going to pick the driven object, which will be thumb 1, or thumb base skin, sorry. And we're going to use the rotate Z like we had before. And again, amount of influence will be -1. We'll create that and just see how that works here. If we take the bend 1, it does what we're expecting. Great. So now we're going to take the bend 2, and we'll attach that to L thumb 1 skin, like that. Go ahead and create that one. To rotate Z, create. Bend 3 will be L thumb 2 skin. Great. So now those individual bends will affect the thumb as well. Cool. And finally, we need to just work with the length. So again, we'll do this the same way we did before. The L thumb 1 and 2, we click on length, click on scale. Oops. L thumb 1, L thumb 2, make sure to select the end. Click on length, make it scale, set that value to 1. And now the thumb can scale as well. Great, let's go ahead and save this version. Save scene as. Set it to version number 15. And we've got all of our individual controls on the finger set up, but there's one more step we need to do before we can reattach the hand to the arm. If we look at the range of motion on the set-driven key controls, you notice that most of the controls stop at a value of 10 or minus 10, where we set the set-driven keyframe limits. Most of the time you don't want the controls to stop there, however. You want it to continue on to infinity, because you want the animator to have absolute control over how the fingers are posed. And this is a pretty easy fix to do. It just involves some slight modifications to the animation curves in the curve editor, which is setting the animation curves to a value of infinity. So let's first look at the index finger. If you were to take this and you go ahead and modify spread and go left and right, you can see how it stops. So let's look at what's driving that side-to-side motion. If we select L-Fing index skin like this, and we bring up the graph editor, Window Animation Editor's Graph Editor, you could see over here the curves and how they're being controlled. So if we look at the spread attribute right here, there you can see it going back and forth. If we go ahead and do View Infinity, you can see the dotted lines continuing basically flat. And what we want to do is tell those to go linear. So if you take each of these and you go curves pre-infinity linear and then curves post-infinity linear, now you can see the dotted lines extending forever. And in fact, if we were to take the spread and go side to side on the, if we take L finger's spread, now you can see the finger will continue on forever. So that's what we want to do, is make sure that all of our controls continue on forever. So we'll do this on everything. So what we're going to do is select base skin fingers, all the pinkies, all the fingers, all those individual controls. We'll bring up the graph editor for each of those. For everything. And for each of these, we're going to pick all the curves, and we're going to go curve pre-infinity linear, curves post-infinity linear. And now if we take any of these controls and we curl, we can continue on curling forever or back. We don't have any more limits from what the animator can do on those. We'll do the same thing on the thumb real quick. So we'll select the thumb base skin, thumb one twist, and those ones. Bring up the graph editor, grab all the curves, go curves pre-infinity linear and curves post-infinity linear. And you can see it go pwah and shoot out those rays. And again, all of our thumb controls will now work with that as well. Scrunch just keeps on going. And it's up to the animator to tell it when to stop. Okay? Let's go ahead and save this. Save scene as version number 16. So now that the hands are pretty well hooked up, our final step is to go and reattach the hand to the rest of the body. So in order to reattach the hand to the wrist, let's just go ahead and try the simple solution first. If we look back at how our arm rig is set up, we've got a result arm that's driven by both the FK and the IK controls. If we simply parent the hand under that arm, our shiny new finger control should come along just for the ride swimmingly. So let's go ahead and group the hand to itself to do that. So we're going to select all the hand controls here. We'll get the L hand base skin, let's see, the L hand geo, the L-Fing IK handles, the L-Fing side locator, and L fingers. So we'll get all of those, and we'll just group them. Control G. We're going to name that group L hand control group. So let's see what happens when we move L hand control group around. Whoop. Notice anything strange? We're getting the double transformations on our hand geometry, so we've got to get rid of that. So we can select the hand geo, go over to the attribute editor, and remember you turn off inherits transformation because it's already being moved around by the skinning. Let's turn that off. Now we can move the hand group, and that works totally fine. So let's go ahead and move it. We'll display the whole rig. Turn that on there. And then what we want to do is parent the hand control group underneath the hand itself. So if we select that, right here, we've got L hand right there. So we'll take the L hand control group and we'll just parent it right there. Boop, like that. Okay, we want to make sure that it's positioned correctly. So we'll set its translations to 0 and it shows up right there. There's an extra piece of hand geometry, so we can go ahead and delete that. Now, if we move the arm around using the FK or the IK controls, you'll be able to see that the hand moves around with it just fine. We can take this, move that, we can grab the hand control and do this, and it all works pretty well. We can grab the main control, do a curl, a little bit of a relax, thumb curl. You know, we can basically do exactly what we're expecting. Let's go ahead and undo. Same thing with if we're in IK mode. Switch over to IK, grab the hand control and move it and rotate it and all sorts of stuff, and the fingers and everything come along just right. But what happens if we use our bend and side attributes? For example, if we come over here and we grab the hand and we go like this, notice it comes away from the arm. That's not what we want. That's not going to do any good. We want the arm to follow with it. The reason this is happening is because the end of the arm twist control is parented to L hand. So if we look at the start control, the end control, the lower arm group, the low arm start control, whoop, and we go down and we find the end. There it is, low arm end control. This is the thing that controls how this hand is going to be moving right here. And right now, that is following L hand and it's not following the arm. So, it's not following the hand. So what we want to do is get this to follow the base joint for the hand. So to do that, we're going to delete the original parent constraint, which is this one. When we parent constrain it to L hand, get rid of that. Cool. And now we're going to go ahead and reconstrain it. So we'll select L hand base skin, which we can find by going L hand control group, L hand base skin, and then we'll select the low arm end control right here, and then we'll go constrain parent, like that. Now, what'll happen is if we take this, we go bend, it'll pull that up and down, which is great because it means that the whole thing's going to stay connected like that. Yay! So have we solved the problem? Well, it kind of looks like it's working because the hand's staying as one object, but if you notice what's happening, what's kind of weird, is the lower arm itself is stretching to meet where the wrist is. It's not like the entire arm is moving correctly to get there. It's just the lower arm stretching, which means that it's not really doing what we want. What you actually want is the entire arm to go over to where the wrist is, not just the lower arm. You don't want to break it like that. So if you really want this to work correctly, then we're not setting this up in the right way. If you don't care if this works fine for you, then we're done. It's doing exactly what we need it to do. But I think that you really do want the arm to work correctly. Otherwise, it's just going to look really strange. For example, if you were to put the character's hand down like this, and you were to take the lower arm, bring it forward, and you were going to take the hand and kind of bring it up like that, and you want to do the hand pressing into the ground, if you take this guy and you bend, notice how the elbow's not being affected? That's not going to look real. That's going to look really fake and really bad. You want the entire arm to be affected by it. So, we need to change the way this is being done. So at first glance, it would seem relatively easy to get the IK arm to follow the correct way. We could simply parent the IK handles that we have to the L hand base skin and be done with it, right? So like all of it. Well, we could, but one of the most dreaded events in all of Maya is the loop, and we would be getting it. So, what is the loop, and how do you avoid it? Well, simply put, a loop is what happens in Maya when you have an object controlling something that is controlling that object. So let's look at a couple of examples. If you have a sphere in your scene, just like this one here, Maya goes to evaluate the frame it is in order to figure out what it needs to draw. So it does what's called a lazy evaluation, meaning it only evaluates what it needs to in order to draw the geometry that's visible. That's why Maya is so fast to update. At any given time, it's only evaluating the nodes that are necessary to draw the geometry in the scene. So let's say you want to draw this image. You want to draw the sphere in the scene. When Maya goes to draw it, it says, "Where's the sphere?" Because it can't draw it if it doesn't know where it is. So it says, "Hey, where are you? Where's the sphere?" The sphere is the only thing in the scene, so it looks at the sphere's transforms and says, "Okay, here's where it is: position, orientation, rotation, the shearing, etc." And it says, "Okay, this is where it is," and it draws it. But if you have a more complicated scene like the sphere that's sitting on a table here, when Maya tries to draw the sphere, it says, "Hey, I want to draw the sphere, but it's a child of the table. So in order to know where the sphere is, I need to figure out where the table is first." So it goes, "All right, where's the table?" Draws that, and then it says, "Okay, now where's the sphere?" And then it draws that. Simple so far, right? This also works the same way with connections. Let's say you have a cup that's constrained to a hand. In order to figure out the position of the cup, Maya first goes, "Okay, well, where's the cup?" "Well, it's constrained to the hand." "Okay, but where's the hand?" "Well, it's a child of the forearm, and then that's a child of the upper arm." So in order to evaluate the location of the cup, I first figure out where the upper arm is, and then the forearm, and then the hand, and then the cup. Okay, so in order to draw anything, Maya first has to look at what controls it and evaluate that. But what happens when something that's trying to be drawn controls the thing that is its parent? That's where you get the dreaded loop. So, for example, let's look at a common problem. You look at the upper arm's rotation controlling the rotation of a shoulder joint. So let's say this is the shoulder joint, and here's the upper arm. So we have a shoulder joint, or an upper arm that's the child of the clavicle. As the upper arm is rotated upwards, the scene evaluates the clavicle to see where it is, and then draws the shoulder in its rotation, right? But as we know, when you raise your arm above your head, your clavicle has to raise as well. It's physically impossible to take your shoulder and move it up without your clavicle being raised. So a lot of times people will measure the rotation value or the angle of the shoulder to figure out if it's up here, and if it is, then they'll go ahead and raise the arm. Something like this. If the shoulder rotate Z is greater than 0, then the clavicle rotate Z is going to be equal to the shoulder rotate Z. Otherwise, clavicle rotate Z is 0. So here the shoulder drives an expression which drives the clavicle. Okay, but there's a problem, because in order to evaluate the shoulder's rotation, we need to evaluate the clavicle and see where it is, because the clavicle is a parent of the shoulder. So this is an example of what happens here. The shoulder is rotated up to 15 degrees in Z. In order to draw that, Maya goes, "Hey, what do you look like when you're at 15 degrees in Z?" "I don't know. I need to draw the clavicle." So it draws the clavicle. And then it says, "Oh, wait, in order to draw the clavicle, I need to evaluate this expression here, because the expression is driving the clavicle." So it says, "Okay, well, what is the value of the shoulder?" "Well, it's greater than 0, so that means the clavicle rotation is going to be greater than, or it's going to be the same as the shoulder, so I got to figure out what the shoulder is." Okay, so it figures out the shoulder, and then it goes, "Oh wait, now the shoulder is going to be changed," so it ends up going back and forth. It works kind of okay, because it'll just sort of draw something in forward kinematics mode, but if you have IK mode, it gets really, really freaky. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens with that. If you add an IK handle onto the upper arm, you end up seeing a crazy loop. Okay, so here we're using the IK handle to rotate the upper arm to about 15 degrees. And as we know from our expression, when the upper arm is greater than 0, then the clavicle will inherit that rotation. So, the clavicle inherits the rotation. But you can see the IK handle saying, "Hey, hey, hey, here I am, the upper arm, you need to point at me." So the upper arm goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll point at you," and it goes down like that. But as soon as the upper arm moves, the clavicle goes, oh wait, the upper arm's rotation value has changed, so I need to change. So it rotates down. But then the IK handle says, hey, wait, upper arm, point at me. And the upper arm goes, oh, I'm sorry, I gotta point at you. So it goes up to point at that. But then its value changes. And the IK, or the clavicle then goes, oh wait, your value's changed. I need to change. So it evaluates. It goes up. And then the upper arm, or the IK handle says, hey, point at me. And you end up with this crazy loop that just keeps going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth over and over and over and over again and never really getting solved. So that is the loop. And this is the situation we'll end up in if we simply parent the IK handle to the finger control rig while it's parented to the L hand joint. And why? Because this is the network of dependencies that we currently have in our scene. We have an IK arm and we have an FK arm. And then the rotations drive the result arm. That result arm is then the parent of the hand control. That's what we've currently got working on our scene. If we parent the IK handle for this IK arm underneath the hand control, whenever we modify the hand control, it'll change the rotations of the IK arm, which will then, in effect, change the rotations of the result arm, which will then change the location of the hand control, which will change the rotations of the IK arm, which will change the rotations of the result, which will change the rotations of the hand control, etc. You got that? We're going to end up in a loop. So how do we get the IK joints to respond correctly to the hand? Basically what we need to do is yank it out of the result hierarchy and instead constrain it to the controls that the animator is using. Then we can parent the IK handles to the hand control since their rotations will no longer determine the position of the hand. Okay? Let's go ahead and figure out how to do that. So let's go ahead and connect the hand to the FK and IK arms. We're going to select the L hand control group. Right there. And we're going to select anim group up at the very top. And then we're going to hit P to parent the two. So L hand control group is now a child of anim group. The next step is to take a look at what's driving the IK handles for the hand. We want to take those IK handles and parent them to the L hand base skin and then tell L hand control group to follow whatever it was that the IK handles were following. So if we look under the L hand, the L arm do not touch group, right in here, whoop, right there, we will find the two arm IK handles that are being used for the arm. They're the child of the LIK up arm distance end. And this LIK up arm distance end locator is being used to calculate the length of the up arm. Notice it's got a parent constraint on it. Let's take a look at the parent constraint in the hypergraph. Go Window, Hypergraph Connections. As you can see, this locator is being controlled by the being controlled by the LIK hand anim and the LFK hand anim control. It's also controlling the distance and the LIK up arm distance end and exactly how we want the fingers to be controlled. So why don't we just parent the fingers to the LIK up arm distance end control, right? It would carry along the fingers with the IK just fine, but the distance expression we have on the IK arm wouldn't work correctly. We want that distance node to follow along with the bend and side-to-side motion. So what we actually need to do is create another node on top of the LIK up arm distance end that is the same parent constraint as LIK up arm distance end, and then parent that underneath the finger controls. Parent the LIK up arm distance end control itself underneath the finger controls. Then we'll have the finger controls follow this new node and then the FK animation control using a parent constraint. It sounds really complicated, but it all becomes clear in a moment. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the LIK up arm distance end using Control D. Let's go ahead and rename that new node, and we're going to call it LIK hand position. Then we're going to delete all the children of this new node. Delete, like that. And we're going to create the same constraint on the LIK, or that same constraint that is on the LIK up arm distance end, and we're going to put it on this one right here. So if we select the LIK IK up arm distance end and the LIK hand position. We'll bring up the hypergraph like that. We're going to use this to copy the constraint that we currently have. So here are the two things that are driving this up arm, and here's the hand position that we want, the new one. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the LFK hand elbow anim and then the LIK hand elbow anim, and we have to select them in that specific order. It's very important that that's selected in that order. Then we're going to select the LIK hand position right here, and we'll choose constrain parent like that. So now we've got the new parent constraint and we've got the old one right here. So we want to take the settings that are driving the old one and have them drive the new one, so it's hooked up exactly the same way. Okay, so with the middle mouse button, we're going to take settings anim and we'll drag it onto the LIK hand position parent constraint one, this new one. Whoop, like that. Go down to other, and then we want to connect it up the same way the other one's connected, which right now is using the low arm state to the IK hand anim. So we'll select the low arm state and we'll connect that to the LIK hand anim weight 1, just like that. Now we're going to drag the reverse node right here into the left side of the connection editor, so that shows up. Right now that is connected to the output, or the output X is going to the LFK hand elbow anim weight 1. So we're going to take the output X and we'll connect that to the LFK anim like that. Close. Now this new node here is going to follow just like the old one does. Okay? So we'll delete the old parent constraint node because we don't need that anymore. And now this LIK hand position control is going to move with the arms correctly. So we're going to parent the LIK up arm distance end control itself, the one that does all the IK and everything, and we're going to parent that to the L hand base skin. So in order to find the L hand base skin, select that. That's right there. So LIK up arm distance end will be parented to L hand base skin. Boink. Just like that. Cool. Let's just check and see what that looks like if we go into IK control, let's move the state to IK mode and see what happens if we take the bend control now. See how the arm moves correctly? Much, much, much better. That's not going to do anything yet because we haven't hooked it up. But if we move this elbow out of the way, there we go. And now we use bend. See how it's pulling the entire arm? That's exactly what we want. Okay. Sweet. So we still have to get the finger controls here to follow whatever hand we're currently animating. If we're in FK mode, we should follow the FK hand, and if we're in IK mode, we should follow the IK hand. And to do this, we're going to create two nodes that we're going to use to constrain the L hand control group. One will be a child of the FK anim control, and the other will be a child of the IK control that we just created right over here, this IK hand position. Okay, so let's create the FK and IK controls for L hand control group. So select LK control group and duplicate it. Then we're going to delete all the children. Bye bye kids. And we're going to name it L hand FK const. And then we'll duplicate that and we'll name this one L hand IK const, like that. Then we'll create the constraint for the L hand control group, where we select L hand FK const, L hand IK const, and L hand control group, like that. Go constrain parent, like so. And then we're going to parent the L hand FK const to the L hand FK anim, which will be available right under Here we go, LFK hand anim. right under there, parent. So the LFK hand control is right there. And we're going to parent the L hand IK constraint to the L IK hand position, which was the one that we just created. Right there. Parent. Okay. Now we need to control the constraint with settings underscore anim, because otherwise it's not going to know how to move correctly. So what we'll do is we'll choose animate set driven keys. Set. And we're going to choose settings anim as the driver. And we'll choose the parent constraint as driven, like this. And we're going to choose the larm state as the driver here. So when the larm state is in FK mode, right here, boink, we want this hand control to be an FK value of 1 and an IK value of 0, like that. So key both of those. When larm state is in IK mode, we want this to be the exact opposite, 0 and 1. Key those. So now, if we move this, you can see that the hand's moving correctly. We take this guy, we do bend, and it works. Let's see what happens if we're in FK mode. Switch over to FK. Rotate this. The hand moves correctly. What happens if we do bend? Whoop, it pulls up like that, which is correct. Now the trick here is you may say, but we don't want the bend to work like this when we're in FK. We want it to pull the entire arm. And what's going to happen is, instead of pulling the entire arm, think of the bend as more of a little 2D or little offset to the FK control itself. Because when you're in FK, the position and orientation of this upper arm is very important. And most likely you're only going to be using the bend inside as kind of offsets or tweaks to what you've currently got. It's most important in IK mode that it moves the entire arm correctly. So we've got something that works here pretty much how we're going to need it to work. Okay? So let's go ahead and save this. Save scene as. Call it Finger Rig version 18. Alright, so we've got our finger rig all set up and working correctly. It's attached to the arm, and our happiness is all expanding, ever filling us with joy. Yeah, but we're not out of the woods yet. Oh! We still have to step through all of our animation and rigging rules to make sure the rig is consistent with our own standards. And once again, what are those rules? We want to make sure that we have simple controls, the animation should be easily transferable, the controls should be unique and make immediate sense, they should have the correct rotation orders, they should be named correctly, and they should be keyable only on what we want the animators to key. Alright, let's step through one at a time, make sure our rig meets these requirements. These simple controls. Are controls as simple as they could be? Well, the hand itself is a pretty complicated setup. We've distilled it into two types of controls, a main control for gross motion and then individual controls for adding on to overriding that gross control. Once an animator starts playing with them, they're pretty easy to work with. It's a little daunting at first, but knowing the amount of and the types of things that you need to be able to do with the fingers, having this type of control is really, really wonderful. So it may start off being a little bit confusing, but you pick it up pretty quick. So I would say yes. Is the animation easily transferable? Again, we've extrapolated our animation data down to the hand control structure so we can import and export animation as we need to. Control should be unique and make immediate sense. It's a hand control, and our control looks like a hand. So I would say that's pretty immediate and makes pretty good sense. Controls have the correct rotation orders. Yes, we did go through and make sure that they have the correct rotation orders. Now, you might find that some people like the rotation order set up a different way than what you initially think is correct, and always be open to the idea that the initial thoughts you have on the rotation orders may not work. Try different setups and see what works best for you. Okay? And control should be named correctly. We've forgotten to add the underscore anim suffix to our animation control. Let's go ahead and do that right now. Select all of them, L fingers, etc. And then in your shelf you can click on the add suffix to selected objects. Boink. Change that suffix to anim. Add suffix. Done. Alright. limited keyability. We should only be able to key what we want the animators to be able to key. We don't have any attributes on our animation controls that can be keyed that we don't want because they were clean to start with. However, the animator can move this thing around, which we don't want them to be able to do. So, if we select Fingers Anim and we go into the attribute editor, we need to lock translate and rotate and scale. So right mouse button, lock attribute. Right mouse button, lock attribute. Right mouse button, lock attribute. Now they can't translate any of that, or they can't do it on any of the individual finger controls as well. So that's all sorted. Looks like we've met our animation control requirements, but what about our rig requirements? And they are limiting the control selection, clean rig presentation, and rig relocation program. So let's look and see how we've done. We want to make sure that our display layers are correct and only controls that we want can be selected. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to turn the Do Not Touch layer back to reference mode here. But as you can see, there are things in here that people can touch which we don't want to allow them to touch. So we need to make sure that the Do Not Touch layer has that in there. Okay? So we don't want to hide the things that we don't, or we want to not hide the elements, but we want to put those elements inside here, things that we don't want the animator to work with. And we do want to hide elements that we don't want them to work with as well. So we're going to take the L hand base skin, and right now we can actually see that. We don't need to really see that because it's skinned, so we're going to hide it. Poink, like that. Then what we want to do is put the fingers in a layer here. So, because that way we can turn things on and off. So, if we create a new layer, double click on it, and then we're going to call this let's fingers layer, or L fingers layer. We're going to change the color to something other than the standard default color, maybe this color here. We'll save that. We're going to select fingers anim and add those to it. So now we've got a good finger control color, which we can turn on and off, like so. And then what we want to do is make sure that the skin itself here is a member of this Do Not Touch layer. So I'll add that. So we can't select it. Cool. And there we go. Now we have our layer set up correctly. Okay, let's go ahead and check out the outliner and see if it's as clean as it can possibly be. We'll scroll up to the top. Phew. Alright, what do we got? Well, we have L hand control group right here. Is underneath anim group, but it could probably be renamed to be more consistent. So we're going to call this L hand anim group. Let's open this up and see what's inside here. Alright, we've got L hand base skin, L hand geo, L fingers IK handles, L fingers side loc, L fingers anim, etc. Let's select the base skin, the handles, and the side locator here, and group them together. And we're going to name this group L hand do not touch, because we don't want the animators to touch it, right? Then we're going to take the geometry, just in case you end up with more geometry than just this one object here. It's good to have a group for it, in case you want to add stuff like fingernails and things like that. L hand geo, whoops, group. There we go. So now our rig looks a little bit cleaner. That's great. Let's go ahead and check out the good old rig relocation program. We should be able to take the entire rig, move it anywhere. Let's check our global scale. And do our bend controls and everything else still work? Yeah, so far everything still works exactly how we expect. Sweet. Awesome. Okay. We've now added an arm rig and a hand rig to our JJ character. That's awesome. Let's take the next step, pass the rig off to the animators to try out, get feedback, make whatever changes they request, and send out a clean version developed from scratch using the notes that you created while working on this. Alright, remember to keep track of what you do because it's much easier to create it the second time when you remember everything. And get ready because in the next course we're going to be covering legs and feet and mirroring and snapping and all sorts of other fun things like that. Okay? So, save this version, send it to the animators, and get ready for part 4.